Thank you, Raymond. That explains all by itself pretty much why we're here tonight. What we've seen, we're in changing times, big changing times, and things are. Some people feel that they're kind of coming down around our ears, and they probably are in many areas. And one of the things we've seen, at least I've seen, and I think you probably have too, almost, if you look at the internet, I tend to be on Facebook and email, and you see the news even, almost every day there's a new example of enforcement, law enforcement, police, division with the people. There's the accusations of law enforcement doing harm to people, the people they're protecting. There's accusations on the other side. We've seen a division and a parting of the ways between our law enforcement and the people. And we don't need that. In these changing times, we need to be together. Just as Raymond has pointed out, we need government, we need law enforcement. The law enforcement is the arm of helping us protect our society that we're in, our whole community. We're all together in it. They're not them and us. Most of us, we find ourselves, you drive down the road and here comes a police car. What's the first thing you do? You look at the speedometer. I do, and I know you do too. Oh, is he going to get me? That's the first thing that goes through your mind. Have I done something? Is he going to get me for something or other? I don't know what it is, but he's bound to get me for something. And that shouldn't. Why does that go through our mind? There was an example just the other day. I seen one of these TV programs. It was a law enforcement thing, and she was chewing out the police. I hate you guys. I don't like you guys. He says, "Oh, well, we're your servants here." He says, "Do you not like the firemen too?" "Oh no, I like them. I just don't like you guys." "Why not?" Well, it's usually because they're catching us doing something we shouldn't be doing. But the point is we've got a division in there, and in these changing times, we need to be together. And our government and our law enforcement are our agents. Each one of them here tonight, you're our agents on our behalf. Just as in our Bill of Rights that Raymond just read. So today, we're trying to start a dialogue where we can take a look and say, I don't have to look at my speedometer when I'm going down the road. I can wave at him and know he's my neighbor. He's my friend down the road. He can help me. He's here to work with me. He's taken special training to help me. So we tried to bring together the local law enforcement and to have some questions. We sent out to some of our people and says, do you have questions? What is the problem that you're concerned with? And a lot of it is just we're ignorant of the laws. We're ignorant of how they're administered. We're ignorant of a lot of things. And we like to, probably the law enforcement people are ignorant of how we're thinking. Why don't they like us? We don't know. They're looking at us probably the same way we're looking at them, and it becomes them and us, and we don't need that. So we decided to bring them together, and fortunately the guys have been very willing to stand up and say, okay, we'll be questioned. But we don't want to question per se tonight. You're not going to grill these guys. We're looking for exchange of information. And we're going to educate ourselves and hopefully educate them. We're looking at the way we're going to do this is try to we've got 4 of them tonight, and one of them is judicial and 3 of them is law enforcement, and the judicial has to handle what they present to him or don't present to him, but they deal with how the laws are administered. We were going to have a 5th one, the Colorado Highway Patrol. They had to call me Saturday afternoon and says, we're short-handed, we can't get anybody breaking loose to be here. So they regretted that and said, another time maybe. So So we'll deal with the local. We have the, is it Wildlife and Parks or Parks and Wildlife, Matt? Parks and Wildlife. They got stuck with that a year ago or 2 years ago, whatever it was. Matt Thorpe with Parks and Wildlife. And we have our DA, Will Furs, is here to keep all those guys in line. We have the Roy Lane, our Cortez Police Chief. And we have Steve Allen, our Sheriff. And we're going to have them come up and take a chair. And rather than opening it up the floor, we've asked questions from various of you. You've sent questions in. We've taken those questions, put them together, and tried to, some of them are, because we had 2 or 3 of the same questions by worded different ways, so if your question isn't exactly the way you worded it, it's because we combined it with somebody else's. And we're going to try to root out some of our questions that we've had about, some of it's constitutional, and then went down into some of it just specific. Why are you stopping me with flipping your lights on at me? And what do I do? So we'll kind of cover the gambit as best we can. But the questions, Bud Garner, he's agreed to help me out, and let's have those questions. We'll be asking the questions, and they can answer and kind of enlighten us, and we'll, where needed to be, we'll try to fill in a little clarification here and there if we don't think they're getting it all the information out. And when we're all through, if you have some questions that you didn't get answered, at least you didn't feel like I got some questions that didn't even hear that subject, you kind of buttonhole them after the meeting. We have to clear out of here by 9 o'clock, though, so don't sit around too long. And also, there might be some piece of paper back there in the back, and we can write down your question, and we'll get it to them. Or I suspect they'll be open to even having you contact them later on. They're really not bad guys. They really aren't. Just because we got a bad badge on them, and they're still one of us, okay? Is there anything else in my notes here? With that, would you gentlemen like to come up here and grab a seat? And am I forgetting something, Bud? You're looking at me like I'm forgetting something. Okay, good. Bud and I'll get at the 2 end seats, and you guys get in between. And what we can do is we ask questions if... that was deliberate, huh? And what we'll do is Bud and I'll swap back and forth asking questions. And whenever Bud's asking the question, I'll pass the mic on to whoever's answering. Now, a lot of these questions are going to be... each one of you may have something to say, and some of the questions might be very specific, like if it's a game violation, it'll probably be Matt. And just so we all know who is who here. Matt, since you're on this end, Matt Thorpe, DOW. Steve Allen, our Sheriff. Will Furs, our DA. And Roy Lane, the City Police. That's who they are. If you haven't seen them, you know, it would not be surprising. Hopefully you haven't seen them, at least not under adverse conditions. But then hopefully you never do, but hopefully under friendly conditions. Anyway, I was saying, if Bud asks a question, I'll pass my mic to whoever's answering, and then get the mic back to me, and then I'll ask a question. He can pass his mic to whoever's answering, because we're trying to record this, and we want a good response, so you can use the mics. So, let's go. As long as you don't give me a fine. So, well, we'd like to start off with each one of you, just kind of take 2 or 3 minutes and to kind of summarize your basic direction and purpose of your agency, and specifically how your agency will protect our liberty. That's very precious to each one of us. And how do you protect and serve? I know the police chief, your cars have a statement on it that says protect and serve. What does that mean? So Might all start off with you since that.
Okay. I just want you guys to know I was on my way to Durango today and topped over the hill there by Montoya's, and there was a state patrol car parked off the side of the road. First thing I did, let up on the gas and looked at the speedometer. So it's not only you guys that do it, and I've been in this business a long, long time. So I think it's an automatic reaction when you see a cop. Let's see if I'm speeding. The purpose of my agency or the Cortez Police Department is to enforce the laws set down by the state of Arizona, state of Colorado, the city of Cortez, and the U.S. government by using the decisions made by the Supreme Court to guide us in the way we do our business. How am I going to? I think that the way I protect your liberty is to make sure that you are able to come to Cortez, be safe, be free, and not have to worry about anything while you're here other than bringing your money to Walmart and spending it. So I've been in this business for 49 years. I've been the police chief in the city of Cortez for 34 years, and hope and think, surely I wouldn't have been here this long if I hadn't done a decent job of all of the things that I've said I was trying to do. I think that we need to understand that there is right now in our country a real disconnect between some of the people and law enforcement. I think we see on TV that a lot of that disconnect is, I guess it's from, and don't think that I don't ever think that there's not policemen out there who go about doing their job in too aggressive a way. I would never say that because that's taken on a lot that I don't know. So I think now is a trying time for our profession, a very trying time. And I think in the years that I've been in law enforcement, I've seen this thing happen 3 or 4 times. I've seen us be in real disconnect with the communities. And something always seems to bring us all back together. And I think that is the fact that we love this country and we love the people around us. And the only way that we're going to really get this back together is trust of one another and able to serve the country and serve ourselves. Thank you.
I'm Will Furs, and you mentioned that I'm kind of the judicial element of this group, but to be clear, we operate, my office, the DA's office, operates under the executive branch. So while I am the person in court, so to speak, more often than my colleagues here, we all are part of the same law enforcement part of our government, and that being the executive branch. And my agency has a unique opportunity, frankly a luxury, to look at what these gentlemen do and what their respective agencies do from an academic standpoint. I have the luxury of sitting behind a desk and in front of a podium and analyzing the actions and reactions and parts of law enforcement's day-to-day activities in a very protected environment. And I then have to interpret and understand the Constitution so as to make sure that our community is enjoying the rights that it's guaranteed. And I can say with confidence that law enforcement in this community is not what we're seeing on national television. what we see kind of plaguing our 24/7 news outlets is not my experience here. And the communities that I serve, that being Dolores and Montezuma counties, enjoy a robust and honest law enforcement set of agencies. And I'm proud to be the person who takes their work to court, who interprets their actions as constitutional or unconstitutional, and is their ally in the criminal justice system. And so our office serves the community in that respect. And it's our job to make sure that we are all communicating together, that law enforcement, myself and my agency included, are apprised of the Constitution, are mindful of it, are following it. And that is something that happens on a day-to-day basis because what the Chief spoke of, our Supreme Court constantly interprets the Constitution in a way that we are obliged to follow thereafter. And so that is an ongoing practice for us to educate ourselves and to work together in ways that protect you all and protect our constitutional and naturally derived rights.
Thanks. I'm Steve Nellen, your sheriff here in Montezuma County. I started in January in a direction of rebuilding the public trust, which is what we've been doing and striving for every single day since January the 13th. It's because of the type of training that is being brought in and focusing on character and the integrity of the people that serve. They work for you. And they know that because I tell them that every day. And they know that. The thing is that we're the peacekeepers. And that's how I look at us, is to keep the peace. That's our number one job, is to keep it safe in our communities. And by developing the community policing aspect, if you want to call it that, it's an acronym that has been there for years. But the actual working is completely different. It's called communications. It's talking to each other. It's working with each other. It's actually going out and introducing ourselves to each and every one of you. And that's what they're doing. But it takes time. Changing policy and character, as well as the culture, takes time if we're going to do it right. And we have to think about that. But it doesn't come from just me. It comes from every one of you as well as everybody else in this community. Because I talk to people every single day. And that's what it's all about. Is just talking to people, doing what we can to help in their day-to-day lives, but just being there and letting folks know that we are there. When you need us, we'll come. That's what we do. And that's what we will always do. That's why the programs that we've instituted are geared toward rebuilding that public trust. Because that's something that takes so long to obtain. And all it takes is just one bad thing. And it's gone, isn't it? It is. And so that's what I think about constantly every day. Is that I don't want to lose what little I've gained so far. For all of us. Because our agency is here to work with all of the agencies together. And by setting those examples, I think that you'll see a big difference. It'll go a long way. It wasn't really bad. It was just there was no direction. And now there's a direction, and we see that. And if you turn on the television, you can see the things that happen, just like what you talked about. That isn't us. Okay? And that's the thing that we don't want to have happen here. You don't see rioting in the streets of Cortez or out here in the county or in the town of Dolores or Mancos. No, what you see is people that are coming together for each other, and that's what we want. And so we're here to help bind that if we can.
I kind of wish I would have gone first after having to follow these guys. They're all very eloquent and well-spoken, and I'm just a game warden. You know, I was hired because I could tell an elk track from a deer track and stuff like that. But just a couple of quick thoughts. You know, it's interesting just because, you know, as a wildlife officer, you know, I'm a peace officer just like a, you know, state patrolman, sheriff's deputy. So I have all the authority to, you know, enforce all the laws of the state of Colorado. But the kind of law enforcement that we do is a little bit different, just because really, you know, we're more narrowly focused on wildlife law enforcement. And so it's a little bit different because honestly, most of the people that we talk to, you know, like if a state patrolman pulls you over, there's an issue, right? But most of the people that we talk to, we're just checking a license, you know, and so most of our interactions are just sort of that, you know, there's kind of the law enforcement component where we come up and, you know, hey, how's the fishing going? Hey, I need to take a look at your license. How many fish do you have? And then, okay, everything's good. Then it becomes, you know, we're just talking about the fishing. Oh, yeah, you know, throwing a panther martin and it's slaying the fish. So I think that's just kind of a distinction of how we do law enforcement. Just because of the nature of our job is, you know, we're so fortunate in the wildlife law enforcement that 98% of the folks are doing things right. You know, occasionally people make mistakes. You know, sometimes there are a few people that are, you know, the poachers, the guys that truly are having a negative impact on the wildlife resource. Those are the folks that we want to get to. But I mean, for the most part, it's, you know, we're just checking everything's good. Sometimes there's a minor infraction and we deal with that as we need to. But, you know, I don't know. And I mean, I understand because just like these guys said, I see the trooper, I check my speedometer too. And I mean, I realize that people do that for the game wardens as well. But, you know, and one of the other things too is that we're not a traditional law enforcement agency. You know, all the game wardens, you know, that's one aspect of our job. You know, but we're trained biologists, so we're the guys that are out there, you know, checking on the resource, you know, making recommendations for license numbers, that sort of stuff. You know, we also are working with landowners because we understand, especially places, you know, like out here in Montezuma, Dolores County, a lot of those really critical wildlife habitats are on private lands. And so, you know, the wildlife belongs to the state, but we're working with the Forest Service, the BLM, and with private landowners to try to help manage those because we can't do all the management. You know, we're the government agency charged with looking over and trying to ensure that those populations are there for us to enjoy and for our kids and our grandkids. But without that partnership with all of you, it's not going to work. So, anyways, thank you.
Roy and Matt, take your car down to your dealer and they can show you how to use that cruise control thing. Okay. So then you don't have to worry about. We're all familiar with the phrase of ignorance of the law is no excuse. We can't use that as a defense in court. How do we as citizens handle a law enforcement situation where ignorance of the Constitution comes into play insofar as that interaction is playing out?
Okay, I take it back. I want to be the last guy to go. Jeez, you guys are beating me up left and right. You know, I think, like these guys had said, as far as constitutional matters, you know, for our officers in Parks and Wildlife, you know, we're trying to, you know, we go through rigorous training. In fact, as wildlife officers, we have more required training, or have traditionally been required to have more training than other agencies for reasons I won't go into. But, you know, one of the things that we're constantly doing is we do legal updates. And so we're trying to get that information, whether it comes from our DA's office or from our own training folks, so that we are aware of those items. You know, certainly if there's any kind of case law that comes out that affects how we've interpreted the laws in the past, we're trying to distribute that to our officers as soon as we can. So that's, I don't know if that's a good answer, but I think that's my best answer for how we try to do that within Parks and Wildlife.
how it pertains to certain private property without certain.
Well, let's kind of go with our little rules that we set up, asking about that afterwards. And we can, yeah, we'll have a chance to, if Bud wants to ask him.
Okay, how do we handle the ignorance of the Constitution by law enforcement? Well, there shouldn't be any ignorance. And that's why the training is there. They get it constantly. They're all held to the same laws, the same Constitution as you and I. And they're there to protect it for all of us. That's what it's for. They follow the law. When there's questions about whether or not their actions were within the Constitution, that's determined by the judicial branch. And that's where it should be. Okay? And the thing is that as far as search warrants go, we have to follow the Constitution. We can't obtain a search warrant without probable cause and being sworn with an affidavit before a judge. But it doesn't mean that we can't seize evidence that's in plain sight or plain view. We can't, it doesn't mean that we can't seize evidence that has been abandoned or being in a lawful place seeing something that's unlawful. Those have all been determined by different case law. And that can all be challenged and that can change. There's no doubt about it. But educating ourselves so that we don't make those mistakes, that's what really it's all about, is not making those mistakes in the first place. And showing respect and restraint goes right along with it. Common sense goes a heck of a long way. And it's real simple. So long as you know what the law is, you know the Constitution, it helps guide us. That's what it's intended for.
So the question, how do we handle the ignorance of the Constitution for law enforcement? This group is one prime example of how we address what is a perception of ignorance. And the power of the electorate is another example of how we address ignorance of the Constitution. If you don't believe your leaders, your law enforcement members are effectively knowledgeable of the Constitution, then you vote them out. Then you make your statements and your complaints known at the ballot box. You also, as citizens, would report illegal or unconstitutional conduct. You would observe and report what you perceive to be unlawful behavior of law enforcement. Active groups like this are excellent ways for the community to remind its leaders that you're watchful of what they do, and that ignorance is not an excuse. And I can say firsthand that the gentlemen at this table here today have made training a priority, and communication between agencies perpetuates that training. Just be it informal or formal trainings, we are constantly communicating about what's happening on the streets and what the law allows and what the Constitution precludes. And so there is always going to be a human element to our law enforcement. We are imperfect people, and so when there are examples of ignorance of the Constitution, we would like to address them, and frankly, we do address them. And we address them constructively in ways that prevent them from happening again. And this group only helps us do that.
I think you see what happens when law enforcement doesn't do the job properly in their way. We either get thrown out in court, okay, for not doing things the right way, or heaven forbid we have a case that goes clear to the Supreme Court, and then they tell you what you will do. So, ignorance of the Constitution, my office has these books in our office. We hold, every year, we hold a session right after the Colorado State shuts down and passes all of their laws, and they're signed by the governor. then we have people come in from the state, and we're trained on the new laws. We're trained on new court cases that have come out of the court. There's probably not many of you remember Miranda and prior to Miranda. I was a cop prior to Miranda. And when Miranda come down, I thought at that time, we'll never get another confession as long as the world is around. And guess what? It hasn't made that much difference. What the Phoenix Police Department did was wrong with Miranda, and what you've seen happen as a result. This court come out and said, no, you can't do that no more. You violated that man's rights. So we have a Supreme Court decision that tells us how we can do those kind of things that caused the Phoenix Police Department to violate Mr. Miranda's decisions. I was in Arizona at the time that come down, and there was probably a lot of things happened at the Phoenix Police Department that was never put on TV. So when we do things wrong, we get corrected. And I'm not going to sit up here, and I don't think any of these people sitting up here is going to tell you that we're not going to make mistakes. We're human just like anybody else, and we will make mistakes. And the way to do that is to correct those mistakes. But I live in this community just like the rest of you. I want this to be a good community. I want this to be a tight community. I want this to be a community of people who respect each other. And if we don't do that, then the reason we're all here tonight is it has a tough road. We have to respect your fellow human being.
From your statements, does that suggest that if one of us are involved in an issue and we feel like, hey, my constitutional rights have been violated, you didn't do it right, and this type of thing, that we could, or maybe it's my family or whatever, we can come to your offices and say, hey, let's talk about this. Is that correct?
As far as I'm concerned, you're welcome in my office anytime, whether you want to come and shoot the bull, whether you want to come and complain, what you want to do. If you just want to come and sit down and talk to me, my office is open not 24/7. No. Let's not go there. But, my phone number's in the phone book. If you want to call me at home and you don't want to come by the office and you don't want people to see you come and see me, and I've had people that way, call me on the phone. I'll meet you for coffee. I'll whatever you want, but you bet, you come and complain. If you think you have a complaint, how am I supposed to know if you don't come tell me? I can't be out there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, watching everything that goes on. And if you don't come and tell me, it's just as much your fault as it is mine.
Let's go on. Since you got the mic, that'll work out good. How many laws do you think you're expected to enforce? We hear that there's about 3,000 new laws every year. Do you enforce all of them? Or do you choose which ones to enforce? And what is your line in the sand for enforcing unconstitutional laws?
We try to enforce what's on the book. There's no way I have 28 sworn officers. There's no way that those 28 officers, and sometimes there's only 3 on the street at a time, there's no way we can enforce every law that's in the books. It's just not going to happen. I think that at this point in time, most of the laws that we enforce are on site, or somebody calls in and complains, and we enforce that. But there is absolutely no way you can enforce everything that's on the books. So, what was the rest of that?
Who's your line in the sand for unconstitutional laws?
I've always operated that there's a difference between the spirit of the law and the letter of the law. I've always thought that the spirit of the law was more important than the letter of the law. And the example I always give is if you're driving down a 30-mile-an-hour street and you're going 31 miles an hour, the letter of the law says you're breaking the law. The spirit of the law says that's not what we're asking. We're asking that you drive that vehicle in such a way that you don't injure yourself or somebody else. And I think that's the spirit of the law. And that's what I preach to my people all of the time, is that the spirit of the law is what we should enforce and not the letter of the law.
The chief is right that there are a huge amount of laws on the books that, frankly, go unenforced, mostly because we don't know that they're being broken. We are often responsive to illegal conduct in that someone calls 911, we go, law enforcement goes out and addresses the concern at hand. As a DA, I have a more kind of nuanced ability to pick and choose what to charge someone in criminal court with versus what law enforcement might have probable cause to arrest someone for. And so the DA's position is a bit different because I'm not only looking at what laws were broken, but I'm also looking at how to perhaps effectively hand down a sentence that prevents the same law from being broken again in the future, be it as a consequence of addiction or domestic violence or poverty. All of these things are playing a huge role in why people are committing crimes. And so as a DA, I have the discretion to charge certain offenses that might carry a certain sentence versus another. Or I might have certain opportunities in the courtroom that wouldn't be available for one crime but available for another. And so I am able to enforce those laws kind of as a matter of strategy and as a desire, out of a desire to help the community not only protect themselves from offenders, but also arm the offenders with tools to curb recidivism in the future and to prevent that behavior from happening again. So I can't say that I have kind of a very well articulated methodology as which laws I choose to enforce. But I think you see a handful of laws that are being broken over and over and over again. We get a lot of the same type of conduct. You get a lot of DUIs, you get a lot of drug possession, you get a lot of domestic violence, assaultive behavior, a lot of theft, a lot of forgery. And then within those there are a lot of different kind of levels, but there are kind of the more popular crimes, if you will, that we deal with on a day-by-day, on a daily level. With regard to enforcing unconstitutional laws, plain and simple, I don't do it. I don't enforce unconstitutional law. I frankly haven't been faced with what I would call an unconstitutional law with regard to what I'm doing day to day in my office. But I'll make it clear that I'm not waiting for the Supreme Court to tell me something's unconstitutional. I'm not waiting for someone else to do what I believe my duty obliges me to do, and that is to interpret the Constitution and determine whether or not the law at hand is unconstitutional. And so that is a job that I have shouldered, a burden that I have shouldered pursuant to my oath, and that when and if an unconstitutional law is legislated and then a crime is brought to me under that law, if I believe it's unconstitutional, I won't enforce it.
As far as the laws and how many we have, I've always been a believer that we have way too many. We really do. But there's no way to enforce all of them, and we wouldn't do that anyway. The thing is what's most important to the people in the community? What do they want? And what do they see as important and affecting their lives? The things that deal with the protection of the safety and welfare of our citizens is paramount. It's number one. And whatever it is that we can do to enforce these laws, it just depends. A lot of education goes a long way. And we've done that, and we're doing that. And the judicial system, the district attorney's office, is helping us with that. As far as drawing my line in the sand with unconstitutional laws, the reason why the district attorney isn't prosecuting them is because we're not enforcing that. We don't do that, and we're not going to do that. We all know what's constitutional and what's not. Even the ones that may still be on the books, you don't see those being enforced because it isn't that isn't an issue with us here anyway. It isn't a problem. And so that's how we have to look at what laws we choose to enforce. Actually, it's a reactive type of thing, or it's a preventive type of situation. Those are the two things that really stick out. What can we prevent, and how can we preserve that peace and safety of our communities?
In terms of enforcement, like I said before, really even though we have the ability to enforce all the state laws, statutes, we focus more on wildlife. And I can tell you, even though we have a much narrower band that we're looking at, there's still way more than we could hope to enforce. So I think I guess that just gives me more respect for what these guys have to do, just because, we're exposed to a little bit. But I mean, wildlife law is it's not critical. It's not crimes against people generally. It's not some of those more major things. I mean, it's still important, but it's just different. In terms of enforcement, so that's, where we're more often, that's where we're looking. Occasionally we do run into these other issues that are bigger, that are really outside wildlife law enforcement, and that's usually where, we have good relationships with our, sheriff's office, PD, whomever, and we work with them because, we're kind of the experts in wildlife law enforcement. Their specialties are those other type of crimes, so we're going to defer to them just to make sure that it's successfully prosecuted and taken care of in an appropriate way. In terms of enforcement, even within the narrow stuff of wildlife law enforcement, I guess kind of philosophically the way our agency looks at it is we're not out there trying to write tickets to generate revenue. Basically, our two main goals in our enforcement efforts are to gain compliance, so to get people aware of what our regulations and our rules are, to get them to do the right thing, and to affect their future behavior. And so as a game warden, part of my job and part of when I went through training, all that other stuff, is I'm trying to assess each person that I'm dealing with. And if there's a violation, I'm trying to determine what's it going to take to get this person to change their future behavior. And there's some people that you can just, it's sort of like, I'm sure most of you have kids. There's some kids where you just look at them cross and they're sorry, and they're never going to do it again. But then on the other extreme, there are those folks that, it takes a ticket. It takes something big to try to get that behavior changed. And so that's why we're always assessing and trying to, use our best judgment, our professional judgment, to how can I get this person to do better in the future. And so that's just, I guess, hopefully gives you guys a little bit of an insight that there's a lot of tickets we could write. Frankly, like these guys are saying, some of our rules are so technical that it could trip you up. But we're trying to look at, well, gosh, this guy's trying to do things right. I don't need to write this guy a ticket. Hey, technically, this is the rule, but just fix it. Okay, good. Now this won't happen again, and you can move along. In terms of the, unconstitutional laws, we're not going to enforce an unconstitutional law. Within our agency, we're going to be going to, the other people in our agency, talking to our DAs, trying to say, gosh, this doesn't make any sense. This is something we're not going to be enforcing. Because, the other thing to keep in mind is, and I know sometimes people don't believe it, but truly, people that get into law enforcement, we want to do the right thing. We really do. We put ourselves out there, doing what we do, but because we want to help. And like the chief said, there's people that that abuse their authority that's vested in them, but we really, as a whole, we really want to do good. And the last thing we want to do is violate somebody's rights, because we don't want to do it anyways. But I mean, certainly we don't want to be the example of, like the chief was saying about the guys in Arizona that changed everything. We don't want to do that. We want to do the right thing.
I've often thought if we could get the legislature in the state of Colorado and our U.S. legislature to spend one session getting rid of the old stale laws and not passing any new ones, we'd be a heck of a lot better off. There are so many passed every year, and I never see any getting taken off. And there are laws in there. I know our code book for the city of Cortez, our misdemeanor code book for the city of Cortez, there are things on there that are really ridiculous, and we just don't do it. But I think at some point in time, we're going to have to look and say, we have so many laws that we can't enforce. Why don't we get rid of some of those? Those that are not enforced, why don't we get rid of them? They're just making the book bigger and bigger every year. That's all they do.
Sure glad to hear that, because I know there's some people I've acquainted with that's really worried that you guys was going to force the adultery laws, and you have to go around peeking in all the windows to find out who is.
There's not enough jail space in Colorado to do that.
Several of the questions we got had to do with federal. I'll try to get those together. As we heard Raymond explain that the federal Constitution is a grant of specific and limited duties for the federal government. Around here, we see a lot of either unmarked or barely marked cars. Federal police might be on it. There might be nothing except 5 antennas sticking out from the roof. Who are they? What legal authority, what constitutional authority do they have here in Montezuma County? Do we even know who they are in our various law enforcement agencies? One of the questions here had to do with Jade Helm operation. Now, we don't know everything there is about it. It's all over the internet. If you guys wanted to look it up, I talked to Chief Lane this morning. He'd never heard of it. So he must not go on these conspiratorial websites. Alternative media. We don't know all there is to know about it. It could be something that's fairly normal, just being blown out of proportion. But anyway, the question to you gentlemen is, who are these federal agents? What authority do they have around here? Do they keep in touch with you? And how do you handle that interrelationship?
I'll defer to these guys for a minute. This is sort of out of the game and fish bailiwick, I think.
Let me, we didn't discuss this, but if we're talking law enforcement on the street, the DA may not want to discuss that. And likewise for you. Some of these questions, you gentlemen may not feel expertise at, so just skip it.
Well, I can tell you what federal police is, the vehicles that you're seeing. That's the Bureau of Indian Affairs, Department of Interior. They have authority on Indian country. And do they have authority within the county? Indian country within the county. Yes.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. They are strictly Bureau of Indian Affairs police. Do we keep in contact with them? Yes. Do we know who they are? Yes. It's really important for us, being bordering two sovereign nations, that we keep in contact with the people on them sovereign nations, because we have a tremendous amount of our illegal goings on either go to the reservation or they come from the reservation. Not to say anything bad about the reservation, but we do live in an area where this happens. So we do keep in contact with them. The other federal police in this area that I know about and keep in contact with is the U.S. Marshal's Office and the FBI. So I can't think of anybody else. Can you, Steve?
So that vehicle that says federal police, is BIA?
Yeah. Yes, it is. You'll see it parked in front of our building a lot. They come in and they talk to the guys a lot, and they have a K-9 officer down there who trains with the city's K-9 officers. So you will see his police car there parked quite a bit because he trains with us, because he's the only one dog on the reservation, and you can't train K-9s with just one handler. So he comes up and trains with us. We meet with them on occasion when we have something big going and we know it's going down that way. They're a big help to us, but that's who that is. That's BIA.
Well, you kind of half answered the next question there. Has any of you heard about Jade Helm 15 operation? Is that just totally foreign to you?
I guess I'm the only ignorant one of the bunch.
Just pass it on. Has anybody contacted you? Has been any
No.
connections at all?
No. And what I understand about it, there's 1,500 special forces team and teams that are doing this civilian type of training within several states. I know that in a couple of articles you see where it mentions Colorado. I saw this in a small town in Texas is where the news was at. It's not anything that I'm concerned with, but I've never been contacted by him. Have you?
I'm a sergeant. I have special arm man, I wear. I've heard of that. I've heard of that.
Well, let me go ahead with the next question. Then, so that was kind of a short one, but is there any law that permits an enforcement officer to enter private land and enforce either game or otherwise law without a warrant or permission from the landowner? If so, what law is it?
So the gentleman's question. I'll defer to you guys. I can try to paraphrase because I brought the actual statute book for the state of Colorado dealing with that stuff. So do you guys have a preference if I read it direct or? So it's in Title 33. That's where all the parks and wildlife statutes are. Article 6 deals with enforcement. It's the first one, 101, and it's part 2. It says any peace officer is defined in section 33.1.102, part 32, or subpart 32. So that essentially says any game warden, sheriff's office, or sheriff's deputy, police officer, essentially what you would, reasonable person would consider peace officer, is empowered with enforcing the provisions of Articles 1 to 6 of this title, so that's the wildlife laws, and has the authority to go on to any lands or waters, public or private, to demand of any person who he has reason to believe has exercised the benefits conferred by any license provided for in the wildlife statutes. And then the immediate production of such license and any wildlife in possession, and such peace officers shall have the right and opportunity to inspect such license and wildlife. So essentially what that's saying, to paraphrase then, is if there's private land and there's a pond, and so if any peace officer, if they see somebody that's duck hunting, let's say, duck hunting is clearly, that's something that is a hunting activity, requires a license, so that gives a peace officer the authority without having to go get a warrant, that they can go and enter onto that private land to go and just check to make sure, okay, this person, in my opinion, based on my training experience, is exercising the benefits of a license. So I'm going to go on there, I'm going to check, make sure that they're have a license, that they're obeying any other laws, that they're bag and possession limits, that kind of stuff. And then as soon as that's done, great, thanks. Have a great day.
Yes, we'd like to do the questions up here, and then you catch them afterwards if you can, please. Otherwise, we'll never get to all the questions. I just might clarify, okay, so if I'm on my piece of property and I'm running around on my ATV, heading off toward the back, it's during hunting season, but I'm not hunting. Can they come in and check me?
That's where the hurdle that needs to be reached is that we have to be able to articulate that a person was hunting or fishing. So just that you're cruising around on a four-wheeler, and it's specific, it's not, that's where I think people, now that it's parks and wildlife, they're like, well, is it a parks thing? No, we can't go to check that you have a little sticker on your ATV. It has to be the articulation that's, the reasonableness of you're using something that would require either a hunting or a fishing license. So that's, we're not just going to go willy-nilly onto somebody's private land. We, like I say, we own property, not as much as you guys because we're state guys, but, we want to be respectful again. We don't want to do things wrong, but, and if you think about it, would it make sense for, if we're cruising around and I see Mr. Gills out there duck hunting, does it make sense to say, well, okay, Matt, you need to go to town, you need to write a warrant, you need to get the DA to look at it, you need to get a judge to sign it, and go back to go onto private land? No, because by then, that, especially the way I write, and the DAs can attest to this, it's going to take a while for that to be signed and come into being. So it's just, that's one of the things, and I can't say specifically, but that's been on the books for a long time. I know, there's some constitutional questions that come up, and I'm sure, people in this room certainly have those questions. I don't know of specific case law, but I'm sure that that's been challenged at some point. And so that's where, we still work under that premise that, it's allowable because of those circumstances. I think that's why it's kind of a unique circumstance that allows us and gives us a little bit more latitude than, in another regular law enforcement situation.
Just a little bit of clarification on that. What you read has to be, in any reasonable mind, a violation of the Colorado Constitution requiring search warrants. And my thought as you were speaking was, the state has constitutional authority to regulate the roads, to require me to have a driver's license. That does not authorize a police officer to inspect my vehicle, even though I'm in a licensed situation. It takes a search warrant to search my vehicle. Why does it not take a search warrant to search my land just because you think I shot a duck? And maybe the DA could weigh in on this, because we're getting into that dual operation here.
That's a great question. And I guess to step back, and I agree with you, because the state of Colorado, we as the citizens, but the state collectively possess the wildlife resource. And so that's why, the wildlife, the Parks and Wildlife, the commission, the agency has the ability to regulate that stuff. And again, that's where it's a little bit different. And I've heard that before, because another thing is that, we can, if someone is observed hunting and fishing, let's say you're out on the forest, we're authorized, whereas like a policeman is going to talk to you because there's a violation. We are allowed, and it's another statute that I could read, but it says that we are allowed to come and contact you to ensure that you're following within those regulations, to ensure that you have a license. And like I say, I understand what you're saying, but I guess where I come at it is that it's been on the books, and I think part of it is it's just a little bit different, and it's, again, it's not reasonable. I don't think that, so I want to check you. Let's say you're fishing at McPhee. I'm not going to go get a search warrant to come and talk to you to ask to inspect your fishing license, because you're going to be done fishing.
That's in public. We're talking about private.
Sure. honestly, all I know is, I mean, this is what the statute is. And I mean, like I say, if this is Stump the Chump, believe me, I'm the biggest chump sitting up here. And I'll put that out there right now. But I mean, that's the state statute. And again, I'm going on a base that I'm sure that there are others who have raised this issue. And, you know, I don't know what lengths they've taken it to, but I mean, it's something that has been there for, well, I mean, the 20 years I've been doing it, but obviously it's been around much longer than that. So, I don't know. Not a good answer, but I don't know.
Another part of Title 33 kind of articulates, the requirement of probable cause, the constitutional requirement that, and I'm paraphrasing the statute, each officer with probable cause, in accordance with the constitutions and the laws of the United States and the state of Colorado, may open, enter, and search all places of concealment or where other material evidence related to violations is found, and then the evidence thereafter can be seized. So what's important is that this probable cause element is present and can be articulated by law enforcement officers. And there are a wide array, well, not wide, there are several kind of legally nuanced exceptions to the warrant requirement. And there are a number of reasons for those things, and we've heard kind of one example is that the potential for the destruction of evidence or the loss of evidence is one warrant exception, and with probable cause and certain articulations by the officer, one can enter, seize, observe, search without a warrant. And Title 33 is a codified example of that.
As far as, and I think we beat this one up pretty much, but I can just look at it this way. If we're driving down the road, we don't have our blinders on. We can use our senses just like you. I can see, I can hear, I can smell, okay? And if I see something that is a crime in progress or evidence of a crime, well, what's my job? Is to not only enforce the law, but to protect people's property, right? What if you're out there butchering a cow out in the middle of a field? Is it your cow? I don't know. I don't know. But if I've never seen you there before, I think you would expect me to stop and ask, right? What about, for example, livestock that's not being cared for properly? I mean, you can see that, and we should do something about that. Maybe it's land that you may own, but you've leased it to somebody else to hold those horses there, and they're not taking care of them. Well, that's not right. And I'm sure I'll tell you what, we definitely get a hold of you and talk to you. And maybe it's something that doesn't mean anything. But that would be something that I would think that if we saw something, and that's that probable cause. It's not just to go out there and look around. I mean, we have to have a probable cause to do that. We have to have that reason and be able to articulate it. That's all there is.
I don't know if I'm keeping track here. Huh? Yeah, the warrants. And I don't know if I know how to use that thing. Yeah, the no-knock warrant issue, and especially with, we hear it at the federal level now that there are certain instances where there are self-executing warrants and self-written warrants that a law enforcement agent can write his own warrant without a judge and then execute it. And I've not heard of that at the state level, but I have seen cases at the federal level. How do you see the view of no-knock warrants? And I think this question probably comes from watching too much NCIS. Probably comes from some TV shows because we see that, but they have to solve the crime in an hour. So, but anyway, the whole issue of warrants, and especially no-knock warrants, which may be executed in a dangerous situation. So how would you How would you gauge that, either by its usage or by its necessity?
We do have the authority to obtain search warrants, and it's not something that we do a lot, not frequently. The stuff that we're doing generally it's not that type of a high risk warrant. Although there are times where we do investigations that lead to more, other crimes, because it's kind of the strange thing. Some of the people that tend to violate a lot of different stuff. So, there's certainly, we've had some instances, but if that's the case, then that's when we're going to work with a sheriff's office or the local police department and defer to them, because, really, usually it's going to be more elevated than just merely wildlife stuff that we're after. But, really, a no-knock warrant is not something, even for our agency, we'll talk with the DA and the judge. Some of our a little bit higher risk, sometimes we'll try to do them early in the morning just to make sure we catch the folks there. But we clear that with the judge, just sort of establishing that reasonableness. And we want to be able to articulate why, we're not going to just go at noon. We're going to go at 7 in the morning for these reasons. So
99.99% of our search warrants are not no-knock warrants. That is so rare, and we have to be able to articulate a clear and present danger. And the only thing that I can say about that would be something that maybe you could understand. A group that's just recently out trying to look for this group of bank robbers that happen to be so violent, right? Well, that to me would be a clear and present danger that you can't just go knock on the door and announce yourself because you'll be answered by bullets. Now that would be that, but we have to have it approved by the district attorney before it's even presented to a judge.
Yeah, in my experience, I haven't been DA terribly long, but I have not seen a no-knock warrant. I have not been given one to review, and there is the general kind of Fourth Amendment requirement that law enforcement officials knock and announce their presence when you execute a search warrant, and that is the kind of general rule. And there are a number of exceptions, and this kind of broad term of no-knock is one that you have to articulate in your search warrant as being required and being necessary, and the warrant has to expressly authorize forced entry without prior announcement. That's kind of what no-knock means. Forced entry, no announcement. And there are a couple ways that law enforcement can attempt to seek such a warrant, and circumstances known to an officer or person either at the time the warrant is being written and then approved by a judge. They have to articulate such things as clear and present danger, or the likelihood of evidence being destroyed quickly or disposed of, most often used in narcotic or drug warrants, or that notice is going to, again, endanger the life or safety of an officer or another person. Perhaps maybe there is a hostage inside, and the warrant is meant to go search the premises for a person who might otherwise be endangered if the presence of law enforcement is known prior to their entry. Or such notice is likely to enable the party that's to be arrested that they could escape, or that notice would be a useless gesture. And so you can either articulate these requests in writing, that is then signed by the judge, previously reviewed by the DA. But there are instances as well that allow an officer who is executing a search warrant to make an on-the-fly decision to do a no-knock, provided he or she can articulate these reasonable suspicions that one of the exceptions to the knock and announce requirement applies, and that they ought proceed for safety or for evidence preservation or for escape prevention, that they should then go ahead and execute a no-knock warrant. So there are very kind of legally set out ways that one can seek and obtain a no-knock warrant. There are also other exceptions that allow law enforcement to enter in a no-knock way without getting the warrant based upon their observations kind of while they're at the door or while they're coming up to the place to be searched or seized. Again, this is an exceptionally rare event. In our jurisdiction, these might be more used in other kind of more urban environments, but our law enforcement, I've never seen one. Chief and I were just talking. He's never presented me one. I know Sheriff and I and the prior sheriff never presented one. And they're for very unique circumstances. And I think we've seen the horrors of what can go wrong with a no-knock warrant, be it out of concern for the person in the house. I mean, some of the questions we'll get to in a little while talk about Make My Day and talk about your legal authority to protect yourself and property from intruders, and being, subjected to a no-knock warrant could certainly give rise to people justifiably arming themselves in a way that puts them in danger as well as law enforcement in danger. So it's a very serious proposition to consider a no-knock warrant for both law enforcement safety and for community safety, and accordingly, our agencies rarely see them and rarely address them.
Yeah, in 34 years, I don't think City of Cortez has done, well, I know they haven't. And the only way I would ever consider even letting one of my guys write a no-knock warrant would be the fact that we needed to save a life. And if we need to save a life, then you bet. But I can't think of any other reason to issue a no-knock.
Oh, good. Some of these questions we go down here, everybody doesn't necessarily have to answer, but like the next one here, maybe just one of you or two of you knows the answer. Does the Forest Service or the BLM have authority to stop me on a county road for either a traffic or a game violation?
Yeah, the simple answer is yeah. Game wardens are post-certified law enforcement peace officers, and accordingly they're granted by statute the authority to enforce all the laws of Colorado. I'll pass the mic in a second, but I think we've heard really the protocol is that the Department of Wildlife chooses to enforce Title 33 and doesn't really wish to involve itself in other crimes, and that's a choice of the department, despite the fact that the statute allows them to do so, to expand upon their jurisdiction.
To clarify, is that what about Forest Service and BLM Rangers?
Forest Service and BLM Rangers, I have to look at the definition of peace officer, and I might pass the mic to these gentlemen for that. But preparing for these questions, I kind of addressed the Parks and Wildlife folks, and they are considered peace officers able to enforce those laws.
I'm pretty sure I'll look it up when we take a break or as we're going, but I'm pretty sure that they're not considered law enforcement per our state statutes. And I'm not sure because I'm obviously not associated with the Forest Service or the BLM. Based on my previous experiences, though, I know that there's some mechanism where the Forest Service is able to assimilate and enforce some, Colorado statutes. So I know I've worked on other forests where those guys do make like traffic stops. And I mean, there are, at least on Forest Service and BLM roads, they have their own federal laws. And so I know, they have the ability to stop you on a logging road. It's a 20-mile-an-hour road. But as far as, on county roads, city roads, I couldn't speak to that.
Let me just summarize, and you all have read all of these. Let's go to the last page because they deal with interaction between a particular officer and a particular citizen. And so what these questions, I think, are trying to get at is how do we as citizens react when we're pulled over, when we're contacted in some law enforcement engagement, whether it's speeding or jaywalking. I mean, you know, the whole gamut of things. But just try to summarize how your officers view how they should contact us and how we should react in regard to that contact. What are the limitations and what are the expectations?
I was going to say, why don't you guys? Well, we don't do a lot of.
Yeah. What should do? Well, number one, what should happen is that they should approach and at least introduce themselves and tell you the reason why. And they should be respectful, and will be. It's nothing that is controversial at all. Be maybe not even a violation that you have done or done something wrong. Maybe it happens to be you're coming from an area where something else took place, and maybe you have seen something. We do that. It's communicating with people. But as far as a violation, that's what our deputies should be doing, and that's what everybody should be doing.
You know, I have been on the other side of the sheet a couple of times going to Arizona and getting stopped. I'm sure his radar was wrong. There's no doubt in my mind about it. But when he walked up to the side of the car, the last time I got stopped, he introduced himself. He said, I've clocked you for X number of miles an hour in a zone. He said, may I see your driver's license and insurance card and registration to your vehicle? First thing I said to him is, officer, my driver's license are in my pocket. My insurance card is in the glove box. I have to go in the glove box to get it. I said, I also have a gun in the vehicle, so that there's no surprises for him. There's no surprises for me, that he doesn't jump back out in the middle of the road and pull his gun because he sees a gun. I want to tell him there is a gun in my vehicle, because I don't want to have a shootout out in the middle of nowhere. So when a city police officer stops you, the things that he should do is he should introduce himself. He should be polite. He should ask you for your driver's license, identification, insurance card, and registration for your vehicle. My advice to you is, if you have a gun in the car and you're carrying it there legally, you should tell him that you have that gun. Whether you're carrying it on your side, whether you're carrying it wherever, you tell him, because it stops all of the problems. If he's not nice to you and he does not treat you well, then you need to tell me about it, because he is a member of this community just like you, and he should treat you no different than he treats anybody else. So, yeah, you bet. We want to be part of the community. And like Steve said, you know, you may have a tail light out, or your turn signal may not be working. You may be dependent on that turn signal for the cars behind you when you change a lane. If he stops you as a courtesy stop and checks everything and says, you know, you have a tail light out, a lot of people, you would be surprised the number of people that call me and complain, well, hell, that's only a tail light. Well, hell, I might have been behind you and run over you too when you change lanes. So, yeah, you bet. If you think that you're being stopped for something you shouldn't be stopped for, then you bet, come and talk to me about it. My advice to you is, don't get in a confrontation with the officer on the street. Go about, let it go about, and then you either contact me or Steve or whoever he works for, and let us get the thing straightened out. But like I say, you know, if that officer doesn't have any surprises at the time he stops you, it's going to go a lot better than if he has surprises.
I'd suggest we have about 2 more pages of questions. And if you guys can take those questions and review them, it's a sense of what our people are thinking, what their fears are, their concerns are, so you're better informed about why we're looking at our speedometer when you come up or whatever. So